Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the underworld. The Star Wars underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun, and it's all-round good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
Whoa! I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Underworld podcast, your weekly source for all the latest breaking Star Wars news, rumors, and discussion. This week, we are breaking down part 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the penultimate episode, and possibly, that's probably the only thing we're going to talk about, but we might, if we have time, also discuss the Bad Batch Season 2 trailer that was released several weeks ago now at Star Wars Celebration, although it doesn't really feel like it was several weeks ago. It still feels like it was yesterday. And we'll also take a look at some quotes from Taika Waititi about his upcoming Star Wars film, where it's at, and when we might be seeing it. That'll probably be it. I can't imagine we'll have much time for anything else on this week's show, but of course, deep dive on Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's what we're all here for. First, though, introductions are in order in case you're new to the show or you've forgotten who we are. That can happen. And my name is Dominic Jones, and with me, as always, it's the founder of the Star Wars Underworld, Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, very, very, very excited to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 5. And maybe some other things. Maybe. We'll see. You know, you kind of have to play it by ear this time of year because who knows? But there is some other stuff happening. Finally, they've given us a break, but there's news out there now. Interesting things happening, and of course, we still got some lingering leftovers from Celebration to discuss. But I think there's plenty to discuss when it comes to Obi-Wan Kenobi. So we'll have to give that the floor at least for a little while.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, for years we thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if they released a movie or premiered a show or did something crazy like that during Celebration. And now I think maybe that wasn't the greatest idea because we need more time to break down everything that came out of Celebration without even thinking about all the stuff that's happening outside of it, like releases of TV shows and all that. But who knows how things will shake out next year in London when we'll all be there, Ben. Just making sure Ben knows he's coming to London next year. Also with us, as always, good friend and co-host, Chris Seekell.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what the amount of jail time I would get for smuggling Ben over to London. Like, I don't know how much of a crime that is to do that.
I spoke to Kieran a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you know, if a human-sized box shows up at your house the first week of April of 2023, just open it up because it'll be Ben. We'll have shipped Ben over to you, and you'll just have to take care of him until Celebration.
There'll be a little bit of hibernation sickness, so, you know, prepare to have someone who can't see for a little bit.
Hide those life signs. Gonna hide those life signs.
Yeah, we used to joke about buying our own life-size Han Solo and Carbonite. We're just going to make Ben into it. He's just going to put him there, he'll have his hands up, and we'll ship him across the pond to the UK for Star Wars
That'll
Celebration
be what
London.
Happens at the podcast at the IHOP or whatever. With things like, yes, he's alive and in perfect hibernation.
At the B-Hop, the British House of Pancakes.
Yeah.
There you go.
We're going to bop into the B-Hop. Now is that what we're going to do?
Oh, God. I did see that one of our listeners in Scotland commented on last week's show saying there are no IHOPs in Scotland. So, unfortunately, we won't be able to do a tour of all the IHOPs around the UK, seeing as there don't seem to be any.
They have the nerve to call themselves the International House of Pancakes, and they don't have one in every single country on the face of the earth. Come on, IHOP.
It's just wrong. It's just wrong. I did when I spoke to Kieran, our senior British correspondent, Clone Wars Strikes Back co-host, all that. I asked him if he knew what IHOP was, and he's like, I've never heard of that. What are you talking about?
Naturally.
I'm like, next time you come to the States, we'll show you. We'll show you.
It's shocking. Of all the times we've been to IHOP, Kieran's not been there any of those times. What is going on?
Well, yeah, because I guess the IHOP, the inside joke of IHOP began sort of 2017. And so, but the only thing that Kieran would have been at post that would have been Celebration Chicago, and I don't think we made it to an IHOP in Chicago. So,
I don't think at that point.
Yeah. Oh well, Celebration 2025 or 2024, we'll find ourselves another IHOP to go to for some reason. Yeah, I thought the IHOP show being over would mean we would talk less about IHOP on the show.
No, you thought wrong.
It's just given this joke new legs, or has beaten it into the ground, depending on how you feel about it.
Now I'm actually scared of what other inside jokes may come to fruition. Really,
I mean, Ben, we've already gotten you a top hat.
Yeah, that was just
and the theme song, and
just got to be careful what I joke about on this show because it literally just materializes in front of me.
It's kind of the trifecta, yeah. IHOP,
Next
the
thing
top
I know,
hat,
I'm standing in an IHOP. What the?
Yeah. That's been my favorite thing since being at Celebration is to explain the IHOP show to my friends and colleagues back home and have them just look at me with this look of confusion as to why IHOP and what are you talking about?
They should be used to this by now because remember how you had to explain how you had to go down to Mississippi to see the first Star Wars movie in 10 years?
It's true. Well, one of my colleagues at work has just accepted that I go to California 3 times a summer, so that will.
That's literally why I moved there because the summer of 2015, I'm like, okay, Celebration, Comic-Con, D23. I don't want to pay for 6 flights.
Yeah, instead I'll just pay rent.
Right. Worked out great.
California rent.
Great decision.
And this summer is basically that as well. Anyway. All right, we'll dive into Obi-Wan Kenobi in just a moment. But as always, there's a couple of things we want to plug. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcatcher, subscribe. Punch the subscribe button. Literally punch it with your fist and break the screen on your phone. Do that and subscribe. So that way you never miss an episode or any other bonus content we might put out. And there has been some chatter behind the scenes on my end in the last couple of days about a potential bonus episode that could come post Kenobi that you two don't know about. So
yeah,
I'll fill you in on the discussions that are happening after the show. If you're listening live, of course, you can super chat with us. That's a way to make sure that we see your comments. It also helps us prepare for the next IHOP party or the BHOP party or whatever it winds up being.
We're going to have to pay to ship 100 stacks of pancakes from the United States to Britain. That is very expensive. We're going to need to buy some dry ice, and then we're going to have to reheat them. So,
yes, IHOP, I would like to place a to-go order. Yes, 100 pancakes, please. Yes, do you deliver to the UK?
Do you think they'd just sell us some pancake mix, and we could just make it ourselves? Just on the convention floor, we'll just set up a griddle and just make some pancakes there for people?
Okay, here's the thing. On our application for Fan Table, if we include that this year, maybe we'll get one.
No, I think that'll make sure that we definitely go in the rejected pile. They'll be like,
at least one of us has a food handler certification. We know that
I
for
was
sure.
just about to say I am legally allowed to serve food. I just don't know if it works across the pond. That's the only legal.
Well, if they accept international driver's licenses, then maybe.
Yeah. Sounds like a plan.
But you don't understand. In Mississippi, this works fine.
Be like, sir, no more barbecue sauce. You cannot You cannot put barbecue sauce on your bangers and mash.
Fish fingers and barbecue sauce.
Cool. Yum. That's what Shooty Got was. Doctor will enjoy, I'm sure. Also, another way you can support these stupid ideas that we have that somehow find a way to come to life is to become a channel member. You can be like Jesse Bennett, who is messing with me in the chat by bringing up one of our inside jokes saying we can't hear you. But you get this like cool symbol next to your name. That's fun. And you can also become a Patreon supporter. Go to patreon.com/theswu. And for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to our weekly bonus shows where we do things like spend 2/3 of the time watching Chris set up a camera and then try and cram a whole Stranger Things discussion into about 7 minutes. So you can watch that at patreon.com/theswu for as little as $1 a month. There are other tiers available with other rewards. And you can buy merch over at cultureslate.com/store. And speaking of Culture Slate, check out our friends on the network like Star Wars Culture and Ion Canon. And I have a feeling there might be, at least on the social media side of things, some crossover between Ion Canon and Star Wars Underworld next week because something very exciting is happening in Toronto. Because you guys in the rest of the world will watch the finale of Obi-Wan Kenobi on your phones or on your TV screens. About 100 of us in Toronto, because that's how big the theater is, we'll be watching it on the big screen with a live Q&A with Deborah Chow and Hayden Christensen after the fact. Damn. So, yeah, next Wednesday, Matthew and I are going to we're going to watch the entire season on the big screen and then shout questions at Hayden and Deborah about the series afterwards. I feel like there's some opportunity for some podcast crossover there. So keep your eyes peeled for that. All right, let's talk Kenobi Part 5. Oh, that should say Part 5. It says Part 4 on the screen, but oh well. We could talk about Part 4 again. No, let's dive into Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 5, written by Joby Harold and Andrew Stanton, and directed, of course, by Deborah Chow. Let's start how we always do. Go around the table, get some initial impressions of the episode. Ben, as always, you're up first. What'd you think of Part 5?
Wow, what an episode! What an episode, guys! I think this might be one of my favorites so far. I think this might be the favorite of mine, the best one so far for me. And that's not to say that I don't have a few quibbles with things here and there, but like I think it's maybe the one I've had the least problems with. And I think it's mainly because, and I don't mean to make this sound like it's a knock on the whole show, but like it's kind of the episode I've been waiting for. It's kind of giving me what I've wanted from this show from the get-go, which is like more stuff on Reva, on her backstory, which, fun fact here, because I was thinking to myself, like, if we don't get something about Reva's backstory in this episode, I'm going to go on the podcast and complain about it this week. That was my plan. Because I'm like, this is going on far too long.
Ben's sitting there on Tuesday going, if they don't do this on the show, then this is what I'm going to say. And if they do this, then I'm going to say this.
Because I mean, like it's not a freaking plot hole that they didn't answer the question you want answered 3 episodes ago or the first episode. Like that's not a plot hole. But I was getting a bit impatient with like, okay, I want to know more about this character. I'm invested in her. She's interesting. She's doing some interesting stuff. Why is she doing all of this? And we got that information in this episode, and it came out to be very interesting and very climactic, I think. So like ultimately I like where it ended up, and I like that we got some really good answers, got some great action, got some more introspective on, Obi-Wan Kenobi and his thoughts and everything, and we got some freaking flashbacks finally. So that was all in all, it's like a complete like package of like kind of little bits of everything that I kind of wanted going into kind of were given to us in this episode. So I really, really enjoyed this one.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this episode most resembles what people imagined when they were talking about this show, because it relied on flashbacks in a pretty significant way for a couple of key moments. There was Darth Vader was a huge presence in the episode. Obi-Wan was a huge presence in the episode. It related to his mission to protect Luke while also still being a big part of the Princess Leia story. Like it's delivering on a lot of those things that I think, was, as you said, Ben, the expectations going into the show. Chris, over to you. Your initial impressions on Part 5.
Yeah, I agree with Ben. I feel like this is what we've been waiting for. And I definitely think this was a more solid episode than the last few. So I enjoyed it a lot, and it answered a lot of questions that we had. There's been a lot of questions asked, or a lot of questions we've been asking about the last few episodes, mainly involving Reva's backstory and the Grand Inquisitor and where the heck he went and stuff like that. So this, of course, answered them. And of course, it answered them exactly how we expected, which I'm a little disappointed by that. It was kind of the obvious answers. But it was.
Keep going.
Well, the answers nonetheless. There wasn't anything like that shocked me about this episode. Like, I know, they probably wrote into the script in such a way they're like, oh man, we're gonna have this shocking reveal that like the third sister is like a Jedi youngling, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, that's shocking. Whoa. And then people like pegged it like immediately. Like right they immediately said like, oh, she looks kind of like that one youngling in that scene. I wonder if, and yep, they got it. So I wonder if they expected people to catch on to that or not. I would say though, the thing that did surprise me wasn't the fact that the Grand Inquisitor came back, because obviously we knew that had to happen. But the reason why he was playing dead, I will give it to them. I was not expecting it to be done like that. I thought it would be a situation where, he would just, come back and be like, all right, I'm healed now from my wounds.
Yeah.
But the whole reveal of, they had given Reva the Inquisitor, the Inquisitor title as kind of a fake gesture to prod her to bring Kenobi out. Like I thought that was kind of a brilliant move by Vader, and probably my favorite plot thing from the episode. So I like how everybody was playing each other. I like how everybody between Kenobi, Reva, and Vader, where they were all kind of using each other in their own ways to get what they wanted, and it ended up really not hurting anybody. So there wasn't really a lot of consequences, and that's really what we're going to find out next week.
That's what next week is for. Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly. It's funny, Chris, you're saying that, people kind of clocked what was going on. And we talk a lot about the way Disney Plus releases their shows versus how Netflix releases their shows. And we tend to, sing the virtues of the weekly release because there's a lot to like about it. And it's sometimes weird to then look at, say Stranger Things season 4, which, is such a cultural moment, but it lasts for 72 hours versus Obi-Wan Kenobi, which lasts for 5-6 weeks. But the reverse of that is that, by drawing it out week after week, like a classic TV show, in the social media age, is that it gives people a chance to not just figure things out for themselves, but to figure things out and then share the fact that they figured things out. So, where in the past, if Twitter didn't exist and all this didn't exist, if Obi-Wan Kenobi was airing every week on NBC or something, in 1987 with a digitally de-aged Alec Guinness somehow, they would, probably some people would clock that Reva was the youngling in the first episode, but they wouldn't then be able to tell everybody else. And so there would be I'm sure there were lots of people who didn't figure out that Reva was the youngling, but then saw on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, Snapchat, Pinterest, whatever you watch wherever you get your content from, YouTube, Google Plus. on your Google Glass.
Oh man.
They saw the posts with somebody going, "Hey, I bet this character and this kid in the flashback are the same person," and that would, it would explain their backstory and all that stuff, and then go, "Oh, okay, yeah." And so then they're expecting the reveal that we get in this episode. For me, what I'll say about this episode is that I could sit here and nitpick one or two things.
Same.
But I really don't want to.
I'll do that for you.
No, you don't have to. I thought this is I think this episode is my favorite bit of Star Wars post 2012. Like in the last 10 years. Wow. This episode, this solitary 43 minutes of Star Wars is the thing that has come out in that time that I feel this just instinctive urge to watch over and over again.
So you're going back to Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order then, is that that point?
Yeah. Going back basically since then. Yeah. And I don't mean that as a dig at anything else, because there's so much that I have enjoyed in those 10 years. There's so much, and there's so much that I have watched over and over again and really enjoyed on multiple viewings. But this episode, when it ended, I immediately wanted to watch it again. And I'd stayed up till 3 a.m. to watch it. So I didn't watch it again, but I watched it again when I got up. And as soon as it was done, I wanted to rewind it back to the beginning and watch it again. Like it has that, like, it just has drawn me in, and it does it, as a standalone, and it does it as part of this larger story of Obi-Wan Kenobi. It is brilliant and perfect in all the ways that matter most to me. So if I think there's a couple of CGI shots that aren't that great, I don't care. I don't care, because the story and the characters and the important moments land better than almost anything I've seen in Star Wars. And so this is like, not to jump ahead, this is like a 15 out of 10 sort of situation here. Like, I really love this episode. I thought it was just brilliant, the way it built on what's come before, the way it pays off on so many things, works as its own piece of entertainment, and also sets up something really exciting for next week. So just loved it. Let's start our sort of deep dive on the episode, the way the episode does itself, with this flashback sequence. And Chris, we're gonna throw this over to you, because it's funny, we spent a lot of time talking about the possibility of Clone Wars flashbacks in this show. I feel like we didn't spend nearly as much time, or perhaps any time, discussing the possibility of pre-Attack of the Clones flashbacks in this show. As one of the biggest Attack of the Clones fans out there, what did you think of seeing those two characters like that again?
Okay, so this is one of my issues with the episode. You probably know where I'm going with this, because people have been talking about this online. So the idea was brilliant. And I'm so glad that they tried to do it.
Mm-hmm.
My issue is that I just could not unsee the fact that Hayden's twice as old now. I couldn't unsee it. And it's like, I'm mad at myself, because I wish I could suspend the disbelief to the point of being like, oh my gosh, this is like 20-year-old Anakin. But like, it was really difficult for me, because he didn't look 20 years old. And I was just like, oh, it didn't ruin it, but it took away a little bit from the magic of it. And I kind of feel about this the same way that a lot of people feel about seeing Luke, CGI Luke, and The Mandalorian.
Right.
Is like, oh, that's so cool that they did that, but it's not quite Luke for me. Like, I have the same reaction to this that people had to that, where it's just like, I'm glad they tried, but it just didn't 100% land for me. So I don't know. We've seen young versions of characters before. And Dom, just so you know what I just said while you were out, I basically said I had the same reaction to this or similar reaction to this that a lot of people have reacted to CGI Luke and Mandalorian, where it's just like it just was a little bit not there, and it took away and made it just not perfect, like not completely magical or transformative, transportative to me to another place. Like for me, like it was really, really cool, but part of me was just kind of held back from just fully being there for it, because I just felt like the other scenes that we've gotten with younger characters, younger than like the actors were at the time, were executed better than this. Like this, they just look like they tried to do it with a bit of makeup and that's about it. And I'm like, I felt like they could have done a little bit more if they had put just a little bit of deep faking into it. And maybe they did and it just didn't work. I don't know. But like, I just couldn't see it fully. And it's sad because for me, because the dialogue was great and everything else was great. And I think it was interwoven with the current timeline of the story really well. And so I don't know, maybe I just need a special edition of that, or need to insert the already fixed versions that have popped up on YouTube of the scene, like people were doing with CGI Luke.
Naturally.
So see, this is sort of what I'm talking about, because you bring up the CGI Luke, and especially in the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian, I told you guys I didn't care for that effect, and it made it so that I didn't enjoy that moment the way everybody else did. With this episode, I don't care. I don't care that it doesn't look right. Everything else about it is perfect. So I am here for it. And yes, I agree. I could sit here and look at it and go, yeah, Hayden looks a little too old for that scene. And yeah, that's not really, he's changed a lot in the 20 years since they shot
and
Attack
it's
of the
not
Clones.
that he looks old. I want to say too, and I despise this subject because there are other reasons, but basically what I want to say is, it's not that he looks old in like a negative way. He just looks, his facial features are just more defined because he's not like a kid.
Yeah, his people change as they age. That's not, and not saying he looks bad. We don't mean it as a negative thing. It's just a fact that nobody looks the same that they did 20 years ago. That's just reality. And so, yeah, no, absolutely. Nobody on this show is making that point in that way. It's not about being mean to Hayden Christensen, because dude still does look good. He just looks different. That's all. But yeah. And so, yeah, that's all I'm saying. Yeah. You can tell he looks a little different. You can tell it's been a few years, but for me, everything about that scene works so well that I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. Everything, it's perfect.
I will admit, for me, it's like, I will admit, like, he probably would have looked better. What I was expecting was like Revenge of the Sith, Clone Wars era,
right?
Like long hair. I think he would have looked better in that era, because I think he was a little bit older, a little bit.
He's 3 years older when they filmed it, so he does look more like an adult too.
So
in that.
I think that would have gone over better for a lot of people. That said, I have zero problems with this. Honestly, I think he looks near to me personally. I think he looks near perfect. Honestly,
and you know what? That's why I think they tried to get away with it, because it hit the uncanny valley for me. It didn't hit this is way off. It was, this is so close, but just a little bit off. And I could tell they were thinking like, man, this guy does not look, I mean, both of them do not Ewan and Hayden both do not look markedly different than they did 20 years ago.
No.
At all. And so it made perfect sense to be like, okay, let's just, use a little bit of makeup and we're good. Like it makes sense for them to attempt that. And I see why they did that, because they don't look too much different when they have the same haircut and Ewan has the same beard. It's so close, but it just, again, hit that uncanny valley of like, it's so close, but it's just not quite there. So it's almost weirder.
I think also just fit in my own head canon, how I'm interpreting it, like comparing it to like Luke and the Mandalorian, of like, I know when he pulls the hood back, I'm like, I know that's not Mark Hamill. In my head, I know that's CGI. And so I'm immediately kind of thrown off by like, okay, I'm trying to figure this out. Okay, they're obviously using CGI. And there is some visual hiccups in there in regards to how he talks and how he kind of looks and how he doesn't ever turn his head. He's just like this the whole time. And to me, it kind of throws me off. Versus this, where I can kind of compute it as, yeah, he doesn't look like pre-Attack of the Clones Anakin. He's supposed to be younger. He's supposed to be maybe a couple of years younger than he appears in Attack of the Clones. Yet here, he is 20 years older. That's a bit of a difference. And there's nothing wrong with that. He's aged so gracefully. It's amazing. But, you can tell. But for me, it's like, it's Hayden. Like, I know it's Hayden. I can accept it. I can accept the fact that he looks a little bit older, whatever. It's not quite there. And I think they did do, just looking at, obviously they can do wonders with makeup and everything like that. I think they did do some little CGI touch-ups with him. I think a little bit.
They may have. I will say the last
thing. Like a Sam Jackson and Captain Marvel thing, where they just kind of touched up a little bit to just make him look a little bit younger. But, the way he moves, the way he kind of looks, you're looking at something. These characters, we know them so well. Hayden Christensen's face very, very well. We all know it like the back of our hand. So obviously, when he comes back,
I think it's tattooed on the back of my hand. I was just drinking.
So, but all that's to say, like, I totally understand anyone not like it clicking with them. For me, I don't care, because like I wanted flashbacks, and we're getting the second last episode. I'm like. And I was like, there were some people online going like, why did they hire Hayden Christensen if they were just going to have him in the Darth Vader suit? And I'm like, okay, you guys are getting a little impatient, but got a point. Like, where are the flashbacks? And we get it. First scene is the flashbacks. I'm like, okay, I don't even care if he looks 20 years older. He's Hayden.
You know what I would say? Last thing I'm saying on this, because this is obviously like the most trivial thing about this episode. But because it's the one negative thing, it's the most interesting thing to talk about, because it's all these nuances. But last thing I'll say on this is I really liked what Stranger Things did. I know it just came out, so I'll stay away from heavy spoilers, but I'll say like they had a character do a flashback, but they were able to do it in a way by having their current body inside the memory. And that then fixed the problem of not needing a lot of the de-aging. There was still some de-aging that did happen, but it wasn't the main focal point because of a little trick that they did with the writing. I wonder if I was doing this, if I didn't want to go for aggressive CGI and try to put people off the way people are put off by Luke or Leia in certain scenes when she's de-aged, I probably would have written it in the Stranger Things way, where it would have been currently aged Ewan, Obi-Wan and Anakin, and you would be seeing Anakin as if what he would look now if he did not get burned, but then they would still be inside the memory of something before.
Yeah, that's something I suspect we will see in the Ahsoka show.
We got one more week, guys. We got one more week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still possible. And with just on the flashbacks, Hayden in the Revenge of the Sith flashbacks, in the Order 66 flashbacks, that you could have showed me that and said, oh yeah, these are outtakes from 2005.
It's all lighting. It's that same thing about Yoda in the sequels, where everybody was like, Yoda in the sequels looks a little off. And it was because they tried to use the same process to make Yoda as they did in the original trilogy. But you got to remember, he was in an extremely dimly lit swamp with atmospheric conditions and a lot of shadows. And so a puppet's going to look, very, very believable in that situation. Out in the sunlight, a puppet's not. This scene was in broad daylight, but inside, but with lots of windows, so that the characters' faces were lit extremely well. There was no haze in the atmosphere, no tricks of lighting or shadowing. It was just fully lit. And so you're going to see every little detail in that situation, whereas in the Order 66, it's at night and things are shot from further away, and you got the cowl, and there's just so many things to distract you from it, and you're not just looking at his pores like you are in this scene if you're watching it on the 4K TV.
That's what you were looking at. You're like, oh,
it might be a little bit extreme there, but I'm sure let me know if you've seen it on a 4K TV and you have good vision.
I'll let you know next week after the theater screening.
Oh my.
It's going to come down to how good the actual sensor of the camera was, if it could pick it up, or if you just see a little grain at that level.
Yeah. A couple things that would have fixed this, I think, in my opinion, would be like putting it at night, setting that scene at night, probably would have helped it a little bit for people. But again, you're wanting to kind of differentiate it from the Order 66 scene. It's in literally the same set. And then also setting it later in the timeline, but they needed this sparring session. They needed this to be something. This needed to be Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting each other, but not trying to literally kill each other, or at least Obi-Wan wasn't. And so I think that, and that's what I love about the scene overall, is that it is something that felt very important. It felt like a slice of life in these two characters' lives that we hadn't seen before. And that's something that I've kind of griped about in the past, is like we've always skipped over Jedi training. We've always we've never gone into it officially, Luke is being trained by Ben and Yoda. Like the most we've ever gotten really has kind of been like Luke with Yoda on Dagobah. The rest of them, and maybe Rey and Luke in Last Jedi, but like the rest of them, like Anakin and Ahsoka are Master and Padawan, but we only see them training and all, and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and all these different characters that have these really great master and apprentice relationships, where we really don't get into like them sparring or them actually training. This is a great moment of just like, hey, this is how they learn to lightsaber fight. Like, this is basics. Like, this is how they do it. And, ultimately giving Obi-Wan a chance to kind of, and having it directly relate to the story. It's not just a flashback for the sake of flashbacks. It's directly relating to what's going on in the present day.
But that's why it had to be lit the way that it was. You couldn't do that scene at night. Yeah. That scene had to be in bright daylight with a really sort of hopeful vibe to it.
That makes sense.
It needed to contrast with everything else. And again, this is where I come back to, I don't care about the effect or the makeup or whatever, because it works on such a deeper level. You're contrasting their relationship now with then, and so you do everything is the opposite. In the past they're sparring, they're on the same side, they're trying to learn from each other. In the present, they're fighting, they're enemies, they're trying to kill each other. That's what's you have to see it. It has to just be, everything about the flashback has to be the polar opposite of the present. And I love but I do love what you're saying, Ben, about Jedi training. And I'm sort of the opinion that like Jedi training, the less we see of it, the better. That I only ever want to see moments of it like this, like moments, the ones you mentioned, Luke on Dagobah, Rey on Ahch-To, things like that. Like I just want to see moments of it. I want to see these important moments, but these important moments that also, like, part of what I think makes this scene so great is it doesn't feel like it's a special moment to the characters in the moment. It's special to us as the audience because we know what it means and what it represents and what it's contrasted against. But to Obi-Wan and Anakin in the moment, this is just another training session. This is just an average day. They don't see it as something special in the moment. It's only when looking back on it does Obi-Wan realize, or not even Obi-Wan, but the audience realizes what's going on there. that the seeds are being sown there, that the grass is being the groundwork is being laid for where they will both eventually wind up in the present. And so it's just fantastic. And it, it's everything. It's, Anakin may be the better fighter, but he's always missing something. There's something that he's too focused on winning that he misses the bigger picture. And in a sense that happens in this episode because Obi-Wan gets away. But also you can see where Anakin learned from Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm.
Because he does see the bigger picture with what's going on with Reva.
And you see where Obi-Wan learned from Anakin. Because Anakin was like, it's over, Obi-Wan. And then Obi-Wan copied him.
Yeah. There's a lot of there's a couple of moments in there that feel like kind of callbacks to other moments with the other characters. Like even there's the one point where Anakin is swinging the saber over and over again at Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's holding up his saber to block. It felt very Luke and Vader in Return of the Jedi.
Also, some of the lightsaber movements are almost one for one between the previous episode 3, where they're fighting. Because they do the same thing. Obi-Wan's holding the saber up, and Vader's just wham, wailing on him. Same way. It's very similar.
What did you guys think of the way it was parsed out throughout the episode? How we got that training session, which is a relatively short scene in and of itself, cut up into basically 3 segments that we see at different points in the episode. What do you think of the way they did that and how it affected the pacing?
I think that was a good idea because the point of the flashbacks is to kind of like inform the current situation. So I felt like kind of reminding the audience of the past in the spots that were most relevant to the characters in the present made a lot of sense. It's something that I really like about the writing of non-Star Wars shows. Like there's a lot of other shows that do this a lot more frequently. I think even Marvel does this more frequently, of this idea of telling 2 stories at once, the past and the present, and interweaving them together so you kind of have the full picture of what's going on. And so I feel like they're just starting to experiment with this with Star Wars. They're starting to experiment with it. And I think it's going well so far, and I would like to see shows do this more, and I have a feeling they might, because there's a lot of suggestions that future content is going to be all over the place in the timelines. Like it looks like Andor is going to have multiple points in the timeline, and it looks like the Tales of the Jedi might as well, just by nature, but even with the same characters.
Yeah, I feel like with Tales, though, it'll be like, that's just because those are shorts. I feel like it'll be 3 shorts in 3 different time spots.
So it might not interweave the same exact way, but it'll be interesting to see how Andor does it. Because obviously our assumption would have been it would be more like Rogue One, where you have, the past version with the kid, Jenna or so, and then it just goes back into the present. And then there's not really much in the form of flashbacks that I can remember. I think the one scene on Coruscant with
there's
Galen
the one
and Jen. That's one of them, but that was about
it,
I think. So Andor, I assumed, they'll do the initial scene of the origin story and the village and all that we see in the trailer, and then they'll move on to them as adults. But perhaps it might be more of a flashbacky thing. Now, they have done a little bit in Mandalorian as well, when they kept going back to that scene with Din being rescued.
Well, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the show that did the most with flashbacks, which is the Book of Boba Fett. But I feel like this show, this episode, used its flashbacks more effectively than Book of Boba did. And I love the flashbacks in Book of Boba, but this one, as you said, Chris, it felt like the flashbacks we were getting were informing the story of the present. Whereas Book of Boba at times just felt like 2 stories that involve the same character and do inform each other. We were just sort of seeing them play out at the same time. It didn't necessarily feel like Yeah, it didn't necessarily feel like when we flash back to the Tuskens, it was explaining Boba's motivation with the twins, so to speak, the way it did in this episode.
Like, that's what I thought it was going to do, but it didn't, which is why that show fell a little flat for some people, unfortunately, because the experiment wasn't successful.
And it's funny, it wasn't that long ago that we had the introduction of Star Wars Rebels, and I remember Filoni being adamant about the fact that, oh, no, we're not going to have flashbacks in this show. That, Star Wars, as if to say Star Wars doesn't do flashbacks. Up until that point, Star Wars hadn't done a lot of flashbacks. And then pretty much everything Star Wars released after that had flashbacks in it. Like, you're talking about Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, Rogue One, Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian.
Even Force Awakens has the Force back, and that's...
There you go. So
flashbacks, yeah.
So I think I think you can rely on flashbacks too heavily sometimes. Just like, okay, we're just gonna go off and tell more stories, but like, I think done well, they can be done in a really well. I think I like the way they did it in this show. In again, that it kind of goes along, and it's each kind of moment is influencing. It's kind of leading up to something and influencing ultimately what happens at the end of the episode. And I was just stressed out the whole time, because when the first flashback ended, I'm like, is that all we get? Is it all we get? That's all we get. I'm gonna be mad. Okay, I want more. Okay, you can't give me that little bit and just make think I'm gonna be happy about it, because I'm not.
I love Star Wars fans that were like, they give us what we say we want, and we're like, no, it's not enough. But yeah, I think you made a good point there, Ben, which is that sometimes, they run the risk of over relying on flashbacks, and that was something I was worried would happen with this show, because what you don't want to happen is for the flashbacks to feel more interesting than the story that you're telling. The flashbacks should inform the story that you're telling, but they shouldn't overshadow them. And that was something I was worried about with this show. And it makes me feel like the fact that I was ever worried about it makes me feel like I lack imagination now, because I'm like, oh, I haven't seen how well they did. I'm like, oh, I should never have worried in the first place. But if they were doing, Obi-Wan just, going about his daily life on Tatooine for 5 weeks, and there were flashbacks to the Clone Wars and those the border dispute on Ancion that they were doing before Attack of the Clones, and all that stuff.
That business that Kate and Amodia doesn't count.
Yeah. Shout out Star Wars Brotherhood, the novel by Mike Chen. If that was what the story was, where all of the best stuff was happening in the flashbacks, then it's sort of like, well, why did you choose to set the story in this time period? Why didn't you just do a Clone Wars story? And that's sort of how I feel when people say, oh, this show should have had more flashbacks. I'm like, well, the Clone Wars exists for that. That for those stories that you're looking for, the Anakin Obi-Wan stories. But what this show has really succeeded in, I feel, over the last 5 weeks, has been making the story of the present so interesting that, while I've wanted flashbacks and was very glad to see them come to fruition in this episode, if we hadn't had them, I don't think I would have felt ripped off either, because the Leia Obi-Wan story has been so good and so interesting, and everything that's going on with Reva and the characters they've introduced with Tala and Haja and Roken and all of them have been so terrific that I didn't feel flashbacks were missing from any of the other episodes. And so to then get them in this episode and have them work so well with the story in the present was just, it was like a bonus on top of a really good story, a really good Obi-Wan Leia story set between episodes 3 and 4. Instead of feeling like, well, we got an Obi-Wan story here, but it's really just a vehicle for flashbacks, which is what I was worried the show would be.
I wouldn't have minded that. That's kind of what I almost expected the show to be when initially hearing about it, because I'm like, what does Obi-Wan have to do on Tatooine? I don't want to see the Kenobi novel on screen, because, apologies to, I think that was John Jackson Miller, but I was kind of bored by that book.
I like that book. I thought
I'm
that
glad
was
that
alright.
they incorporated the good parts of it thematically into this show. I think that's a really cool that they came out and said that, or someone said that. But the plot was not a plot I would want to see as a movie, unfortunately. Or
It was a plot. It was a plot that was well suited to a novel, I felt.
Exactly. That's maybe a good way to say it. And I'm the type of person who only reads books when they seem like movies, because I see the movie playing in my head, which is why I like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. But anyway, I digress. Movie novelizations.
And some of my favorite novels have felt like movies to me.
Right. I mean, like, I could have totally imagined the Thrawn trilogy and on screen, and I think a lot of people could too, which is why people are a little surprised that they didn't do that. But that's fine. I still like what we got. So, but anyway, what was I saying? I wouldn't have minded that, but I feel exactly like you do, Dominic, where we didn't need more flashbacks to make this series hold up. We didn't need it. I was completely satisfied just with the initial one at the beginning of the show with the Order 66 and the Younglings. Like, that blew my mind to see essentially a scene out of Revenge of the Sith shot like a 2022 scene was really, really cool. And so that's the type of stuff that I liked and that is innovative and cool to see another angle like that of something that we've seen before, just reshot. So that was fine. And that was enough. But this stuff, it's cool that they've added more in from a character point of view than just we want to see it point of view.
And I think, me personally, I came into the show with very, very specific, not necessarily expectations, but like, these are the things I really would like to see. And I think he even said as much on a couple podcasts. Shout out to our good buddy Jeff White, because I think it was on his Hype Function recently. And I said this, hey, I want Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka and Captain Rex and Commander Cody, and they're in a battlefield on the Clone Wars, and that's what I want. That's the scene that I want. And after watching this episode, selfishly during the episode, I'm like, oh, I hope they flash again. I hope there's other things, and we get some Revenge of the Sith. We do get some Revenge of the Sith. But like the idea of throwing Ahsoka into the mix, while tempting, I don't see her fitting into this. Yeah. I don't see her fitting into the story. I think focusing on Anakin and Obi-Wan and their relationship, I think, is the best way forward. I really don't. I'm past kind of the idea of like, oh, I need Ahsoka to appear in live action or her to be with Hayden or whatever to legitimize her presence. Not really. I mean, we've had enough of her in live action, I think, to well beyond do that. So now I think if that's all we get, I think I'll be okay. I think that's enough. I think, if the next episode, whatever's going to happen then, if we don't get any flashbacks, I think what we've gotten right now has been more than enough to kind of legitimize the whole hype around Hayden being in this. And also, furthermore, being enough for the story.
And who knows what we'll get next week? Who knows what is still to come in part 6. I will say, it's a testament again to the Siege of Mandalore that, having seen this and the direction they chose to go in this, it made me realize why they had to go this way and had to do something pre-Attack of the Clones, because we kind of got the perfect Anakin Obi-Wan Clone Wars scene just 2 years ago in the first episode of the Siege of Mandalore on that bridge. Like, if you'd done that scene in live action, you could almost have found a place for it in this show as a flashback. And it's sort of like that scene it encapsulates their relationship so perfectly at that moment in time that I almost don't need another Clone Wars scene between the two of them so soon after that. I feel like that scene brought that whole era nicely to a close.
Are you sure?
Two characters. Go ahead.
Are you sure it's not just because you have a bias against things that are animated being shot again in live action?
I don't have a bias against it. I just feel like we've seen it already. So that, that scene brought that era of their relationship to a close when they were still friends so nicely that it looking at the larger puzzle
Like
that
warrior
is Star
and
Wars.
a good friend.
Yeah. The looking at the larger sort of picture, the larger puzzle that is Star Wars, it makes more, it feels more meaningful to me to now go further back before all of this and put that piece in now. That feels more impactful whilst looking ahead at where this will likely wind up.
Mm-hmm.
Joel drop in a super chat here. Hot take on the flashback. Seeing Anakin kill the younglings does make it harder to swallow him as a Force ghost at the end of Episode 6, in my opinion.
Interesting. So that's the line. That's the line. Actually killing the younglings and it being proven despite the security footage showing that and the other characters saying that it happened.
I disagree. Like it to me, that's been part of the story since 2005.
Yeah.
And even though we don't actually see it in Revenge of the Sith, we knew it's what happened. It's using one of the, Revenge of the Sith uses one of the oldest tricks in movies, which is you show something that suggests something else, right? For the longest time, you couldn't show a couple in bed in a movie, so you would see them walk into the bedroom and close the door, and we all knew what that meant. So just like you can't show children being murdered. Yeah. You can't show children being murdered in a PG-13 movie, but you can see someone walk in, draw his laser sword, and then cut away.
We're now a PG podcast. So, I mean, I honestly feel like, Anakin igniting the lightsaber and that one youngling who's like really famous now, I forget their name. It recently has been making media rounds.
Source Bandim.
Yeah. Him just doing that little step back that he does,
that's powerful.
Honestly, is emotionally more poignant than seeing someone get chopped in half, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's still like we still don't actually see it. It's more like blade coming down and scared face. Like, it's more it's just kind of a step closer to the implication of, what happened. It's still there, it still happened, it always happened. And yeah, it's messed up. That's the point. That's that where George Lucas intended that to be really, really bad. To show that like a guy can do so many terrible things. Like you can do horrible things and still make the right choice in the end. Still go back on that and redeem yourself in a weird way.
I was going to say, because Joel followed up and said that he's had an issue with this since Revenge of the Sith. So this is a George Lucas problem for Joel, not a Deborah Chow problem. Joel, what about those poor Tusken Raider children? Are they not valuable to you?
Here's what I do want to say about the Order 66 flashbacks that we've gotten. That scene, Master Skywalker, there's too many of them, has been so memed in the last few years that it's lost. I worry that it's lost some of its impact. And so I think showing that a very similar moment again and having it perhaps be a little bit more visceral. Have the younglings in the temple being attacked by the clones first and then coming face to face with Anakin and having Reva, spell out just how traumatic it was. I feel like, it gives back some of the power of Order 66. That
and it also
it's not real quick. It's not that Order 66 ever lacked power, but just the youngling joke just became such a meme, such a source for comedy. And not gonna lie, I've laughed at one or two of them. Not gonna lie, I'm not a perfect person, damn it. But to revisit that moment and be confronted again with how terrible a thing it is that Anakin is doing in that moment, without the for lack of a better term, coping mechanism of going to, Master Skywalker, joke. because you've seen it so many times, you've become a little desensitized to it. It does render Order 66 a little bit more powerful, even though it's always been powerful, as we saw last year with Bad Batch.
Just wait, Dominic, until the Gen Alpha memes start hitting the internet. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be somebody making a joke about it.
Oh, I'm sure, and I'm sure there will be many a meme that comes out of this show, and perhaps even this scene. I'm sure that will all happen.
It's the cycle,
and it's just then there will be some other traumatic Order 66 scene that will wind up, reminding us all of how horrible it is again.
Now we have to show decapitation and cauterization because the last one was memed.
It's not just like a more visceral, more potentially graphic scene. It's the fact that it's played during a conversation between two people that were absolutely traumatized by that moment. Absolutely broken by that moment. Obi-Wan witnesses it, and she witnesses it firsthand. They're broken people because that happened. And there's nobody laughing during that scene. It's very powerful, and it goes to show like how Vader has ruined so many people's lives, and by definition the dark side and Palpatine and all that kind of stuff. But it's not just the lives he took; it's what it did to people, what it did to the galaxy.
Mm-hmm. And we focus a lot in conversations about Star Wars because of how Return of the Jedi ends, and how focused the prequels are on Anakin, on what Vader goes through in his time as being evil. And we don't always stop and think about how the people impacted by Vader react to him, how their stories are felt. And it's kind of something we were talking a little bit about last week with the pilots and how they just die without us knowing them. And there's so many characters that just sort of happens to. Vader can, shoot down Gold Leader or Red Leader or whatever, and we don't think about it. We don't think about Gold Leader or Red Leader. And we don't really feel just how evil a thing it is that Darth Vader is doing in that moment. And, the memeing of the youngling scene allowed people to not think about how terrible a thing it is that Anakin is doing in that moment. And, one of the things that I think this episode does really well with Reva is how this is a character whose whole existence, whose whole being was changed and affected by Anakin's choices and his actions. And she is now inflicting pain upon other people because of the pain that Anakin inflicted upon her. And that's, in and of itself, that's really interesting. And then there's this other layer.
Wait, there's another Leia.
This point has nothing to do with Leia. There's this other layer of Obi-Wan's guilt at not being able to stop him because she calls him on it. She says, "Where were you? He was your Padawan. Why didn't you stop him?" She's saying to his face the things that he's been saying into the mirror for 10 years. Exactly. This is why this episode is perfect, damn it. It puts Vader into context of just how bad a dude he is, even though we know as the audience he is suffering as well. And it also, in doing so, it allows us to see the impact of his action on other people, and it brings to the surface Obi-Wan's deepest, darkest feelings about himself.
See, now I just want to meme it again, because I'm like, well, what was Obi-Wan doing after he killed General Grievous? Like, all of that stuff happened between that moment and when he gets shot by Cody. But for his timeline, nothing happens. Like, he just gets on the thing, and that's it.
He's still fighting the Battle of Utapau.
He was
riding a big old lizard.
Yeah. He was riding a big old lizard through a sinkhole.
Yeah,
That's what he was doing.
Star Wars.
During all of the stuff of Anakin falling to the dark side.
You have to think. You have to think about the fact. Like, go backwards. Think about we're seeing Anakin and Obi-Wan training Anakin. training that Anakin will go on to use to kill millions of people. Like, and conflict horror upon countless people and across the galaxy. That's what Obi-Wan has to live with. And then on top of that, he finds out in this show, oh, by the way, you didn't kill him. You didn't finish him off. He's still alive, and he's still causing pain to countless people again. And you have this whole thing about like Obi-Wan's guilt, and then 40 years after Obi-Wan is dead, you have Luke Skywalker going like, oh yeah, by the way, Darth Vader was created and trained by a Jedi. Luke is throwing Obi-Wan under the bus and basically saying what everyone is thinking all this time. Like, but it's true. Like, Obi-Wan created Vader. Like, Palpatine set it in motion, but you could say almost literally that Obi-Wan created Vader.
Luke has spicy feelings about Obi-Wan, clearly.
Yeah, well, I think Luke is... Yeah, I mean, Luke is perhaps... He's making a point, I think, and he's being a little harder. Being a little harder on Obi-Wan than he would.
Obi-Wan in the corner and oh, screw you, Luke.
Yeah.
Like, come on, throw me in the bus. Jeez.
I mean, right? But and then there's that whole thing of Obi-Wan saying, "Don't go to Bespin, stop," and Luke's just running away. Like, those two don't get along very well. We forget.
They don't listen to each other one bit.
but here's the thing, though. I just had this sudden realization. This whole time we've been thinking about how Obi-Wan was trying to manipulate Luke by saying that Anakin and Vader were two different people. What if in Obi-Wan's head, in old Ben's head, they are two different people because that's what keeps him from having overwhelming guilt about creating one of them? This idea that Vader killed Anakin might be his way of getting around the idea that he made Vader.
Well, and it's interesting, right? On Rebels, which, takes place later in the timeline, but, still I think is worth mentioning, Vader does say to Ahsoka, Anakin Skywalker was weak, so I destroyed him. So perhaps Vader thinks of himself that way. He looks at Anakin as somebody that he had to kill in order to become who he really is.
I mean, that's essentially what he said to Luke when he said, "It's too late for me, son." That's why when Luke tries to redeem him prior to the fight at the end of Revenge of the Jedi.
For everybody listening, Chris is pointing at the Revenge of the Jedi poster behind him.
Needed to work that one in there somewhere.
Of course.
Prior to that fight, that's of course psychologically why Vader, even though, probably knowing it would be a good idea to not bring Luke to the Emperor now that, all this stuff has happened, in his head, he couldn't bring himself to that point. Because, he did view that other person as dead, and Luke's counteracting that. He's saying something different, like he's still inside you, and so that makes sense. And that I'll also add really quickly, that might also be why Yoda and Obi-Wan are so keen on having Luke murder his father, because they're like, you're not actually murdering your father, you're murdering the person who murdered your father. It doesn't count.
And it's the fact that both Vader and Obi-Wan seem to come to the same conclusion. They seem to subscribe to the same idea that Anakin and Vader are two different people. Vader is someone that Anakin is someone Vader killed. Like, I wonder something happens in the next episode. They're like, I don't know, maybe they just talk it out. They're like, yeah, Anakin's dead. Vader's, I don't know. I'm curious what the next episode could hold for us in regards to like setting that up to the point where we have separate occasions. Obi-Wan and Vader basically saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting, in this episode, what's interesting about this conversation is in this episode, it's very clear that Obi-Wan is still thinking of Vader, Anakin as one person. He knows what Vader's actions are going to be. Because he knows Anakin, right? Like, that's one of the moments in the episode that begins a flashback sequence when Obi-Wan says something to the effect of, he doesn't have the patience for a siege. And that brings us into the flashback, and we see how Obi-Wan knows this. And so I think that, you know, for Obi-Wan, yeah, he still thinks of Anakin and Vader as one person. And as has been said, we'll have to see what happens next week. And there may be that, you know, Anakin Skywalker was weak, so I destroyed him kind of moment. Or, you know, I still think that Obi-Wan wants to have another try at redeeming Vader, at redeeming Anakin. And, you know, we talked in previous weeks about how the show went to great lengths to tell us that Leia reminds him of Padme. And one of the last things Padme ever says to Obi-Wan, to anyone for that matter, is there is still good in him. And having seen the bright spot in the galaxy that is Anakin Skywalker's daughter, and perhaps even having seen the, you know, the bright spot in the galaxy that is Anakin Skywalker's son and all that time he's lived on Tatooine, maybe Obi-Wan Kenobi will go into episode 6 saying, if something so good can come out of someone so terrible, maybe there's still hope for him. And I think that moment at the end of episode 4 of this show, when Leia and Obi-Wan are sitting on the ship and Leia takes Obi-Wan's hand, and there's this moment of trust between the two of them, Obi-Wan will feel the presence. Obi-Wan felt the presence of both Leia's parents in her spirit in that moment. And I think if he finds himself face to face with Darth Vader again in this final episode, as we very well know he will, I think he'd want to give it one more try. And something will have to happen that will make him realize Anakin Skywalker is dead, consumed by Darth Vader.
I mean, the thing that fascinates me about Vader and it is when the first thing that he does after he gets in the suit is not to exact revenge on Obi-Wan and try to burn him like he was burned. Mm-hmm. He's not, where's Obi-Wan? Like, he's like, where's Padme? He wants to know where she is. And that tells you that there is Anakin in there at that moment when he's encased in the armor. And so, but the thing is, the only person who knows about that moment is Sidious. Mm-hmm. Obi-Wan doesn't know that there was a bit of Anakin left in there in that moment. And Sidious squashed it by saying, "Oh, she's dead. You killed her. Sorry." So yeah. I'm curious, you know, if Obi-Wan had known that, would he decide to maybe risk telling Vader that he got kids and they're still out there and he needs to kind of change his ways or they're going to end up just like him? Like, you would think that that's something I would consider doing, but it's such a tough decision because it's like when you do that, you're not just, you know, putting Anakin's future in a kind of point of limbo, but you're putting the kid's future as well in a point of limbo because it's been Obi-Wan's plan all this time to hide the children from him and keep them safe. And, you know, it would be antithetical to that to bring up they exist to try to save Vader. And so, but I'm curious if that thought ever goes through his head to tell him about that, because now fast forward to Return of the Jedi, I'm rethinking about what Vader's motivations are for killing the Emperor and saving Luke. Because if he thinks he's not Anakin anymore, what is it? What is the thing? What is going through his head when he's deciding that he's going to save Luke? Like, what is that point? Like, we obviously assume, oh, it's Luke writhing in pain, help, save me. He's begging and pleading. Usually that doesn't work. There has to be something else going on. And one thing I think about that I've never thought about before is the reason why Luke decides to actually engage Vader when before that he was being all knowledge and defense. I'm not going to fight my father. Was Vader threatening to go after Leia?
Mhm.
And so Luke was fighting Vader to protect Leia, which may, of course, be why Obi-Wan's fighting Vader many, many years earlier. But perhaps in Vader's perspective, maybe the realization that there's yet another child of his out there, that might have been something that got into his head a little bit. And when he's seeing Luke writhing around, he might be thinking, okay, my son's not just about to die, but my daughter's brother is about to die. And also, I also have a daughter who's been untouched by all this, who I don't even know. That might have been enough to kind of throw him through a loop to actually rethink, is Anakin actually dead or not? And I've never thought about Leia being a piece of that before, and now I am. And now I'm really curious how it relates back to Kenobi, because Vader and Leia are the two primary characters of this outside of the titular character.
Mm-hmm. I've always taken Vader's sort of evolution through the original trilogy as it's sort of up until he discovers he's got his children are alive, that Padme's children are alive. He is just the Emperor's lapdog. He's so broken, he sees no other way out. And that's what I think we see in Return of the Jedi when he's saying, you're too late, it's too late for me, son, and all that stuff. And there's a really... We don't talk much about the comics on this show. We don't. I don't think any of us are still actively reading them. But there's such a
I'd like to read more of the Soul stuff because it's good.
Yeah, there are. It is good. But there's a great moment that Kieran Gillen wrote in the first Darth Vader run back in 2015.
A personal one.
Where Vader learns the name of the rebel who destroyed the Death Star. Skywalker. And from that moment on, Vader's calculation for everything changes. And I feel like from that moment on, from the moment he realizes that the lie that Palpatine told him all the way back in that Revenge of the Sith scene that you're talking about, Chris, where, where's Padme? Is she all right? Is she safe? It seems in your anger you killed her. The implication being you killed her children as well. Vader has assumed there is no one out there who could that could possibly love him, or that he could possibly love again. And from the moment that, because it's a comic book, Boba Fett tells him that the name of the rebel who destroyed the Death Star is Skywalker. He is in conflict. Vader and Anakin are in conflict from that point on, and they're duking it out, and Vader seems to have the upper hand up until we get to the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi, when he sees Luke, not when he sees Luke, but when Luke sees him as a person, because Luke doesn't see him as a person up until they meet in that moment. He sees him as a monster. He sees him, George always has this great quote about, or there's this George quote that always stuck with me, where he's describing the duel in The Empire Strikes Back on Bespin. Luke is not fighting his father in that moment. He's fighting the man who killed his father. He's fighting the man who killed Obi-Wan. He's fighting the man who's caused him the most pain in his life. So he's not looking at Vader and seeing anything other than the mask. In Return of the Jedi, he's trying to look beyond the mask. And once someone finally does that for Vader, all of a sudden Anakin can come out, and that's where we wind up eventually in the throne room with Vader making his last stand.
Could George Lucas be this level of brilliant that one of the first lines out of Anakin's mouth is "I'm a person"?
Yeah.
That's pretty. Yeah. That's something else.
And it also
it's all Anakin ever wanted. Was to be seen as human.
It also
seen
just
something
occurred
more
to me that the fact that going back to Return of the Jedi, Ben Kenobi says the Emperor knew, as I did, that if Anakin were to have any offspring, they would be a threat to him. And it hits me now of like Obi-Wan and Yoda and Palpatine, although on opposite sides of the conflict they're kind of orchestrating, are kind of wanting the same thing. They kind of don't want Anakin to know about his kids. Because it's better for Palpatine because he can keep Anakin / Vader in this dark place, and he doesn't have hope for anything. And he keeps, and for Ben Kenobi and Yoda, it's, they stay out of, Luke goes and he kills his father, and that's that. And the galaxy is brought back to the way it was. And it's all falls apart when Vader finds out and Luke finds out, and but as Palpatine does, he always turns it back around and it's like, oh, I have a new apprentice, all this kind of stuff. But it all goes back to what we're dealing with right now in this show, which is like, the secret is still there, and I like how, getting back to the episode, guys, I like the fact that we have Reva finding out about this and have that thing, and good old Hasha, he screwed up. He dropped the thing. There's a meme floating around of something like, what you remember you left something on or whatever, and it's just Obi-Wan just staring like, oh God, what have I done?
Yeah. I think we've all been Obi-Wan in that moment where we're like, oh, did I lock the door? Did I leave the gas on? Did I forget something? Yeah. Yeah, we've all been there, Ben Kenobi, that is. and Ben Hart, both of you. Yeah. Something that might be, an interesting question for a hypothetical season 2 would be, what does Palpatine care? Is he interested in at all where Anakin's children are? Because as you suggest, as you say, Ben, Obi-Wan says the Emperor knew as I did. And, when Palpatine, tells Vader in Empire Strikes Back, how would he know that, without knowing ahead of time, how would he know that the young rebel who destroyed the Death Star was the offspring of Anakin Skywalker? I wonder if does Palpatine see them as a potential threat that should be eliminated and that he would work to eliminate them? Or does he just sort of see them as not really an issue unless they can get to Vader? So if they're just going to live out on Tatooine or be an annoying senator in the Imperial Senate, he doesn't care as long as they're kept away from Vader.
I think one thing that's really telling is Sidious's history with Sith apprentices. I think that's what really answers this question, because we've kind of been made to understand that typically there's this rule of 2, and it's apprentice master. The apprentice kills the master and becomes the master, and that's how it works. But you see a different pattern with Palpatine, with Sidious. He wants to be the perpetual master, and so instead, he's always pitting his apprentices against each other so that they don't go against him. And so you have, of course, him pitting Anakin, his prospective apprentice, against Dooku, his current apprentice, and Anakin wins that battle. And I think his plan is probably to pit Luke and Anakin and Luke and Vader against each other in the same way, so that they're busy with a conflict with each other and too busy to turn against him. So that's what I think he would be using the children for, is to just keep the conflict away from being directed at him, because naturally that's what's going to happen. All the apprentices want to team up and kill the master, but they can never agree on how to do it. And so because they're Sith and they're inherently selfish and can't do teamwork.
I also think, as much scheming and planning as Palpatine does, I think a lot of his thing, I think there's evidence to support this, that Palpatine's just a big liar. And just like whatever happens, he's always at the end of the day going like, "It's all according to my plan. Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen." It's like, no, wait, I thought you said you wanted to take over Naboo and all this kind of stuff. Everything, no, don't worry about it. We'll get him in the next movie.
I love democracy. I love the Republic. Very rarely does he tell the truth. Now, there are Sith that love telling the truth. Dooku was really into telling the truth. Maul, very into telling the truth.
That was probably a very awkward conversation when Dooku got to the part where he's like, oh, and yeah, I told Obi-Wan that there was a Sith Lord called Sidious controlling the Senate. You told him what?
Yeah. Yeah. But you're right. Palpatine is definitely the most like active liar of the Sith Lords, but he does, his whole rise to power is by exploiting a larger truth about the galaxy, that the Republic is corrupt and it is failing the people, but he, instead of providing him
way to save Padme from dying, Rey, making people come back, killing people.
Well, far be it for me to say anything nice about the Rise of Skywalker. No, I say nice things about it all the time. But the irony of that movie is, and I mean this in a good way, is that Anakin went to the dark side to seek out that power to bring someone back to save someone from dying. Rey achieved that power by rejecting the dark side. And there is a certain poetry to that. That is an element of Rise of Skywalker that I think JJ got absolutely right, and is a really excellent aspect of that movie, I will say.
Yeah.
Could have done without her being his granddaughter, but that's a whole other topic for another day.
Maybe he was lying.
Maybe he's an active liar. All right. We've covered so much that
it's taken us 90 minutes to cover the flashbacks.
Yeah. But we've covered a lot in our discussion of the flashbacks, because they do run through the episode and they reflect.
Yes.
I forgot that's what we were talking about. Wow, so that's as far as we got. Literally the first shot. This is as far as we got in the episode.
So that was minute 1. Let's discuss minute 2. Someone we should talk about in this episode. Tala. But you just knew as soon as she started laying out her motivations and her backstory for Ben Kenobi, you just knew she was marked for death.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, Ben should have been like, shut up. This is where you could die after this. No.
But that her death was a tragedy, but beautifully executed. And Indira Varma just was such a wonderful part of the cast, wonderful addition to Star Wars. And I sometimes when they kill off a character, you feel like the character deserved better. I feel like Tala's death was the appropriate level of heroic for the character that she was, and that is that I mean that as a compliment of the character. Like, it's a beautiful scene, a heart-wrenching scene that was beautifully shot, beautifully performed, beautifully cut, and like you said, Ben, the droid as well. The two of them going out together. There's nothing sadder in Star Wars than a droid death.
I wanted more scenes with the droid. I feel the same way about that as I felt last week about the pilot. I'm just like, why? I know we're supposed to care, but I don't know who this is.
No, the droid's a hero. The droid was ready to. The droid was ready to take out the stormtroopers in Episode 3 to protect Obi-Wan and Leia and everything, and like the droid, like that's this droid character, like couldn't speak. He wasn't allowed to speak. The Empire wouldn't let him speak. And so, this is, he died. He died so that BB-8 could later, like he died so all the other droids could speak someday. He sacrificed himself in the fight against the Empire. It's a beautiful moment with both characters. I was just, I hated it, but I loved it. It was one of those scenes.
Speaking of droids, Lola.
Yeah.
It took until now for them to realize, oh, there's this little weird antenna. What's this?
I did.
Wasn't there before.
That was one of the. That was that moment was a little silly, but I did kind of love how quickly Leia went, "Hey, a restraining bolt. All right, you're all better."
Yeah.
I thought that was it's a little silly, but again, it worked for me in this episode. Everything works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Leia, I loved Obi-Wan standing up for her. When she's like, I love that she like just jumped into action when Roken's like, I can't crawl into the vent. She's like, I got this. I'm on it. And then Obi-Wan's like, trust her. If you trust me, you trust her. Let her do it.
I think he's having some flashbacks to when this one guy told that one kid to stay in that cockpit.
And it also makes total sense that she might be daddy's little girl in regards to fixing things and figuring stuff out and being good at mechanical stuff. And she does have a scene in Empire Strikes Back where she's fixing the Falcon. So there's always been a aspect of her character that's been mechanically inclined.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It would be remiss to mention the scenes on Jabeam without mentioning how much fun it was to look in the background and spot some familiar faces.
Yeah. Oh man.
I was a little every time I watched the episode in every crowd scene I'm a little bit distracted going, ooh, that person, ooh, that person, ooh, that person. So it was nice to see some Star Wars friends like Corey and Aubrey get their moments in the background there, which was pretty fun. Pretty fun.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's I want to talk about We've talked a lot about Vader in the context of the larger Star Wars story. Let's talk about his scenes with Reva in these episodes.
Yeah.
In this episode, because that fight scene that they have at the end was so cool. I loved how he just he doesn't need the lightsaber at first. He's just playing with her. He's just letting her, she's doing all the prequel era spins and jumps and twists, and Vader is doing his original trilogy, one hand swinging the lightsaber, barely moving. I don't know who choreographed that, but that was so good.
That's one thing that I've always thought of with lightsabers. Just like, couldn't you just use the Force to block a lightsaber? Like, if you're like really like what you're doing. And then we got it in Rise of Skywalker. We got Rey and Kylo just like swinging the lightsaber and just like blocking it. Like that was really cool. And to have Vader just do a whole scene where he's just like, I'm not even gonna waste the effort of pulling out my lightsaber for you. Okay, it's not even worth it for me. I'm just gonna block you, and I'm gonna take your lightsaber away from you, and I'm gonna throw it back to you because you're that little of a threat to me. It's like it reminds me of like Yoda taking away Ventress's lightsabers in the ambush. Of like he takes away, he's like I'm like, you're not that strong. He just gives them back. Like you're no threat to me whatsoever. I don't even care.
Yeah. It was kind of, it was exactly that. It was exactly that. And I love the way Vader just outsmarts her in the episode. How he figures out her plan and he just lets her dig her own grave, essentially. And, Ben, I think you mentioned it earlier, like the three of them, Obi-Wan, Reva, and purposes.
Oh, I'm
and
the one who mentioned that.
Oh, you mentioned that. Sorry.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, did I say that? I don't know.
I think I said that.
Sorry.
I had to think too for a moment. I'm like, yeah. Wait.
I've just
My
merged.
memory is
I've just
really
merged
that
you
bad.
two
I
into
can't even-
one.
can't
I
even
do
remember what I
that.
said.
That's why I always say just somebody said this, because I very rarely remember.
I'm trying to make the effort here, but clearly I'm failing. Whoever, some person made this point at some point in the recent past.
Someone in the chat said it.
Yeah, someone in the chat. It was a super chat, I think. But yeah, the three of them using each other. The reveal that the Grand Inquisitor was alive, for everybody who watched Rebels, it wasn't a reveal, no. But it was well played. It was well executed. I was getting tired of all of the articles that decried plot holes and how that this was, that they might have forgotten. And, I love fan theories, but I was getting real sick and tired of hearing about how the Grand Inquisitor had a secret twin who was going to take over afterwards. So I was glad to get...
So that's why his head looks a bit different. It's not the same guy.
The internet, has just gone too far. Like, I had to wake up to articles today about how are they going to kill Luke at the end of the next episode, and is it going to be another Skywalker?
I implore everybody listening to never click on one of those articles. Never.
I did
ever,
it. Somebody
ever.
else here did, just so to see how dumb it was, because everybody else was wondering.
I couldn't resist. I could not resist. I had to see for myself the stupidity.
Like, the Grand Inquisitor thing, like, it's very out there to suggest that, oh no, there's another Grand Inquisitor who looks exactly the same. But then again, this is a galaxy where cloning exists, so okay.
But what if Luke actually dies in this, and then the rest of the movies, they were just a dream? They just didn't happen.
People say,
that's a legitimate theory.
People say the Indiana Jones movies were, were Han Solo's carbonite dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Star Wars movies are actually Indy's, nightmares while he's, captured by the Nazis or something. And that's what we're gonna find out next year in Indiana Jones 5.
I will say, I've forgotten her name, but the author of the Twilight series pulled that really bad, and that is why I no longer defend that series.
Okay. Fascinating.
Stephanie Meyer, is that her name?
I was going to say Stephanie something.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Sounds right.
How dare you do that?
But I did like the way the Grand Inquisitor return was handled, even though
it was good. Yeah.
We knew it was coming. It was well done. It was well done. And the point has now been made that, getting stabbed in the gut means nothing in Star Wars. But, that one was well executed. So I'll take it. Just regarding the end of the episode with the setup for next week with Luke and Uncle Owen and Reva and everything there. I did kind of like how, in the first episode, Obi-Wan is telling Bail, it's too dangerous for you to come to Tatooine. And even though, Bail is kind of right to come and get Obi-Wan to send him off on this mission. I like that in this episode, we see that Obi-Wan is also kind of right, because it's Bail's, his messages that where he's motivated by fear, a very understandable fear. Like nobody can blame Bail for being scared for his child. And we have to commend the kind of person who would react to the death of his own potential death of his own child by saying, I will now give up everything in my life to go to Tatooine to help raise this other child. That's basically what he says. So again, Bail Organa, just, one of the best people in the galaxy. But but it's his choice to reach out to Obi-Wan, motivated by a very real, very understandable fear that potentially puts Luke at risk going into this final episode.
Owen's really gonna like that. He just has this random king, I don't know, senator show up in the desert, be like, I'm gonna raise your kid now.
I'm taking over. Yeah, I am glad though that it does seem like we're gonna get some more Uncle Owen next week, because Joel Egerton was so good in episode 1 that I feel like we're due, and let's get some Bonnie Peace in there as well.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
How scared they not?
Yeah,
So that whole part of the cast has been because they made such a big deal about Grant Feely, I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
He's the new Luke Skywalker. I love him, and the best shot we've got of him is sleeping so far. And I want to see more. And as much as I've loved the kind of bait and switch of okay, we're dealing with Leia and he's protecting Leia. I want to see some maybe more classic Star Wars. I think bringing it back around to Tatooine and having the cruel, ironic irony of as soon as Reva is left for dead and discredited by the Empire, she finds out the truth is going to be very interesting.
What do you think is Vader's play in leaving her alive? Do you think he's still trying to use her to get things?
It's interesting. I wonder. Vader is I think in the series, he is at his most. What's the word? I don't know. He's the most malicious, his most torturous, his most his cruelest, perhaps.
Sadistic. He's the
sadistic.
Most sadistic.
Yeah. Because he tries to burn Obi-Wan alive in the previous episode.
Yeah.
I don't think he intended to leave her alive. I think he just wants her to suffer.
That makes sense.
It's the classic thing of I had to suffer, so everyone else has to suffer.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what Vader's intention is in that scene. I think there are times when Vader plays 3D chess, and I think we saw that in this episode with him, with him making her the Grand Inquisitor only so that he could reveal her true intentions. But then there are other times where I think Vader gives into that more sadistic, animalistic side of the dark side, which is just making people suffer. And Palpatine is kind of the same way, because Palpatine can come up with these dramatic plans to, take over the galaxy through political manipulation and everything. Or he can just shoot lightning out of his hands and make you scream till you die, basically. That's the duality of the Sith, is that they are meticulous in their planning and can be very, very move with great purpose to accomplish great things. Or they can use their lightning hands, or they'll cut your head off. Or, there's just this, that's sort of the nature of the dark side, I suppose. So I think Vader in that moment, and I think the Grand Inquisitor is doing the same thing. The two of them, they clearly do not see Reva as anything close to an equal. They barely see her as human or sentient, basically. And so they're gonna let her suffer because she embarrassed them, or she tried to embarrass them. And that they think that's a fate that she's worthy of. But of course, the other irony is the Grand Inquisitor says, revenge is a great motivation for healing, or whatever it is.
He didn't say revenge is the best served cold.
Yeah, it's pretty close to it, but he says something, revenge is a great motivation for survival or something. And that's perhaps true of Anakin and Vader as well, but it's true for him and Maul, absolutely. But he says it to Reva, and it seems like it's going to be very true for Reva next week.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's going to be two separate threats that I think Vader and Reva are going to be Reva. We're saying it both ways. It's fine.
Raven.
I think they're going to be two separate kind of threats to Kenobi. And I mean, we have not just Reva finding out about Luke, but also the fact that, Roken's like, yeah, so they're pursuing us and we don't have a hyperdrive. Like, that's an immediate problem that they can't even escape. He can't even save Leia yet, and he's already worried about Luke. Like, that's going to be kind of the whole thing. And I don't know. I don't think Vader intended to leave her alive. I don't think he needs her anymore. I think in a weird way, he's what Obi-Wan said, which is like, he won't see you coming because he's so focused on me. That wasn't technically true. He did see her coming, but he's still like, Vader is blinded by his hate for Kenobi. So, and obviously he still doesn't know he has kids. So, the idea of like, there's a kid on Tatooine or somewhere else, like, that's the furthest thought from Vader's mind at this point.
Yeah, it seems likely that, whatever goes on between Obi-Wan and Vader next week will be interrupted by Reva's visit to Tatooine. And, there's been lots of talk that maybe this show isn't going to be a one and done, and that maybe there is a season 2. And Ewan kind of told us at Celebration he's open to the idea of a season 2. Perhaps that leaves some fodder for a second season of Obi-Wan won't come away from this season, as we've been speculating so far, thinking Vader is dead, but will come away from it thinking there's unfinished business. And that could lead into a second season that will eventually get us to that point that we've been talking about, which is Obi-Wan realizing that, there is no saving Anakin, at least not now, and at least not by him.
Yeah.
Do we know the runtime of the last episode?
I've seen some people say where it's like going to be 90 minutes. I don't know.
There's a lot to do.
The Toronto screening, we could maybe figure this out.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Is like 5 hours and 40 minutes or something.
Okay.
So but I also don't know if that includes Hayden and Deborah.
Well, yeah, those are usually no longer than an hour. So
yeah. So
that seems pretty long for how much footage we've gotten so far, because these episodes have been pretty short.
I feel like the first episode was had a longer runtime.
That was the longest.
Yeah. And they've been sort of varying points up until that. So I don't know. Maybe we'll do some math later and figure it out. But I suspect it seems likely that, as with both seasons of The Mandalorian, and I'm not sure about Book of Boba Fett, but where the finale will be, if not the longest episode, the second longest episode.
Yeah.
I think, there's so much in this episode that I feel like we could keep going on it, but we've been going for a while. And I do want to get to one other thing. I think we'll save Bad Batch for another time, but I'd like to talk about...
It'd be nice to watch it again, because I barely remember.
Yeah, I'd like to, but I would like to talk about Taika and everything that's going on with his movie. So I'll throw it out there to both of you. If there's anything else you want to bring up before we hit final thoughts, now is the time.
Well, how about Vader going full Star Killer in this episode? Now that was something I didn't expect to see in live action at any point.
Yeah. It was cool.
Using just one hand, just like, there it is. Like, pull an array. Like, just doing there it is. It's my ship. You ain't going nowhere.
Yeah. I think that scene is so cool. But that is the one place where I'm like, oh, the CGI is not good enough here. This looks like
a lot of people were complaining about that.
That looked like Star Tours. And, Star Tours looks really good, but, doesn't look like a movie.
I do have this feeling that a lot of the very, I'm sure, high production budget of this show went towards the actors in it.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly. But that was a cool moment. And I've seen some people complain of like, oh, well, if he could do that, why doesn't he do that to the Millennium Falcon in Empire Strikes Back? And
that's leaving faster.
Yeah, and there's
And why does it? It's the same reason why he doesn't do it to the second ship. Because he could have done it to the second ship, but it's a little further away and it's jetting off really fast. Whereas the other one, like a decoy, is just slowly picking up because it's a decoy.
Yeah. So
they baited him into it.
As I've said with other little nitpicks in the episode, fair point. I definitely I can see it, but I don't care.
Yeah,
I love this episode.
Yeah, I feel that way about that one too.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, but it's a cool, very very cool moment. Very cool moment.
Yeah.
So I have like 4 things really quick.
Let's go.
Ned B is carrying. I know Dan Grievous probably already noticed this. He's the separatist freak among us, but Ned B is carrying an E5 blaster, which is the same blaster I think you usually see B1 battle droids.
Mm-hmm. And here's a comment from Dan from about 20 minutes ago.
Oh, he got it! Before I did. I knew it.
Poor Ned B. He carried a battle droid blaster during his final stand.
Dan is nothing but predictable, my friend. But I'm glad you got the good eye. You got the good eye. You caught it before I did. The Imperial transports look to be the same exact ones that we see in the tragedy from the Mandalorian.
Oh,
so that's really cool. I thought that was cool. And there's an actor called Crispian Belfrage. I hope I didn't mispronounce that. He is the Imperial officer that approaches Vader at the beginning of the episode. He is credited as Devastator Captain. So pretty much confirmation that is the Devastator, which is the flagship of Vader prior to A New Hope. It's the ship that captured the Tantive 4. You get the idea.
Fascinating.
Nice. Also, we'll shout out O'Shea Jackson Jr. as Roken. Excellent casting.
He's got a bowcaster. How badass is that?
Got a bowcaster.
He joins the club of humans with bowcasters with Cheer Way.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter that Jonas Swadamo gave him a shout out for wielding the bowcaster. He says Chewie approves, and O'Shea was very excited about this, as he is with most Star Wars things. I love that. Ice Cube's son is just a huge nerd. I love that so much. Yeah, excellent casting.
Don't kill him off in the next episode. We've been through enough. Let him live, so we can show him Cassian or Andor or something.
Between Wade and Tala and Benny Safdie's Jedi,
I'm not over Wade yet. Okay, I'm still not over Wade.
Not over Wade. What a guy. What a guy that guy. Great casting all around in this series. Really, really good stuff. All right, well, then in that case, let's hit final thoughts.
That wasn't 4 things.
Yeah, Ben, that was 3.
Owe us another. You mentioned my 4th thing. You mentioned Roken's book. That's what all I had.
Okay.
There we go.
Cool.
Makes sense.
Well, I'm glad somebody was paying attention. Jeez.
For people in the chat who are asking, Wade is the pilot at the end of last week who died.
Only the most important Star Wars character ever. Where's the Wade figure? Hasbro, come on.
Everyone was sad about.
Where's the granny pilot figure?
I was
I want
heartbroken.
my Wade Funko Pop. Thank you very much. Just go right over here on my shelf. Okay, I got a space for it.
I bet Ben, if you started a petition.
Like that Lazarazi action figure petition.
Look, I just started a petition to get Celebration to Australia. Okay, I got enough on my plate already. I'm sticking my neck out for all our Australian friends. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. All right. Final thoughts and scores out of 10. Chris, over to you first. Final thoughts, score out of 10. Shaking things up.
Yeah, I was not expecting that. No,
I could tell you were thinking like, I got a few seconds here to think. I'm like going in for it.
I'm off the hook now.
Yeah, no, this episode, it was definitely one of the better episodes of the show. I don't know if it was better than the first one for me. I really liked the first episode. I feel like I have premiere-itis right now because I remember with Star Wars Rebels especially, it was all the first episodes were great. And then the middles, and I'm like, And so I'm a very premiere and finale person with Star Wars. I tend to like those better. And so this hasn't surpassed the premiere for me. But it definitely, I think, was my favorite episode outside of that. And again, everything else I'd say would be a rehash of what we've talked about. So I'll just go to the score, which is 9 out of 10. And I will say that full point is off because of the uncanny valley of the flashback. I couldn't give it a perfect rating because that was not a perfect moment for me watching.
Fair enough. Ben, what about you? Final thoughts, score out of 10?
Ooh, yeah. Like I said, one of my favorites of the whole series, if not the favorite episode for me. I think it really built on everything the show was going for so far. As I said earlier, it kind of gave me what I've been waiting for a while. And just, all in a nice little neat package. Some great action, some great characters moments, excellent flashbacks in my opinion, and overall just a really nice story, a nice more stuff for Reva, which I'm invested in her character, and I'm glad to see, because I was genuinely not happy when Vader run her through, because I'm like, crap, I just knew what she's all about. Now she's dead, and I was relieved, okay, maybe she's not out of the game just yet, where she's going to stick around for one more episode. So that's great. That was a relief. And going into the finale, I think it sets up something very, very interesting going into the finale. I think my only disappointment with this episode was I felt like it was setting up a 3-way fight between Kenobi, Vader, and Reva. I feel like they were telegraphing that towards the end. Yeah. And then when the ship just flies off, I'm like, wait a minute, that was a buzzkill. Obi-Wan just ran again. So I was a little bummed about that, but that was really my only complaint about the episode. And I'm assuming we're going to get more stuff in the future because everybody survived. So we'll see next week. But for this episode, man, I think I got to give it a 9.5.
9.5. Okay. All right. So we got a 9, a 9.5. And I mean, I know it's kind of cheap to give something more than a 10 out of 10, but I believe I was told when I gave the first 3 episodes by one of you, I'm not going to try and remember which one it was, that I could give them all a 10 out of 10 because I had to save something to be an 11 out of 10. Well, this is that 11. Okay, that was you. Okay. I've just you two are just sort of one person in my mind.
I believe, if I remember correctly, people will have to go back to the Taco Bell sauce rating system for Book of Boba Fett. But I believe there's one sauce I didn't get to that I saved, and I'm still waiting to use it for a show. And so I'm gonna bring that back for maybe Andor or Mando season 3 and see if we can get to that higher than a 10 rating.
Maybe. But for me, this is absolutely that. It's an 11 out of 10, a 12 out of 10, 15 out of 10. Like I said off the top, it's the thing in Star Wars I most want to rewatch right now. And it's just this conversation that we had this week just now about all the ways it ties in with the other films, with the prequels, the originals, and even alludes to stuff in the sequels. It does what I love it when Star Wars can do, and that I think the best Star Wars does is it stands on its own, but it also enriches everything else. And it does that so well. And so I just, my hat is off to Deborah Chow and everybody else who worked on this episode to make it so good. So yeah, this is not just my favorite episode of Kenobi, but one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars to date. It was that good. So yeah, 12 out of 10. Let's go with that. Why not? From the chat, Matthew Hardy gives it a 9 out of 10, saying it's the strongest episode so far. Jesse Bennett gives it an 8 out of 10, but he had to rewatch it to give it the higher score. So, it didn't land so well the first time around, but on the repeat viewing, it held up much better, which is how I felt about The Last Jedi. So I definitely understand that sentiment, Jesse. Jonathan says, agreed, 9 out of 10, really great episode. Flashback was awesome and also odd with old Hayden playing young Anakin, but still great. All right, well, I think that'll wrap our Kenobi discussion, but we're not done yet. We're going to talk about Mr. Taika Waititi and what's going on with his Star Wars movie that is due to come out sometime. Kathleen Kennedy actually, during Celebration, it was a very interesting quote that she gave, because she said something to the effect of, somebody asked if it was going into the Rogue Squadron slot, because if you remember in the Vanity Fair article, they basically confirmed the reports that Rogue Squadron was, on the shelf. And so they asked her if it was going into the Rogue Squadron spot, and she sort of said no, but we're hoping for a late 2023 release. And I'm like, that is when Rogue Squadron was supposed to come out. So I feel like there was a little bit of some wires got crossed in Kathleen Kennedy's mind, as happens to us all. And you say, "Oh yeah, I'll see you on Tuesday," when you mean I'll see you on Wednesday. And I have a feeling she might have meant 2024 is more likely when we'll next see a Star Wars movie, specifically the one by Taika Waititi. But Taika was out there. He's getting ready for the release of Thor: Love and Thunder, and he was interviewed by Total Film, and they asked him about what's going on with his Star Wars movie. He said, "Look, I think for the Star Wars universe to expand, it has to expand. I don't think I'm any use in the Star Wars universe making a film where everyone's like, oh, great, well, that's the blueprints to the Millennium Falcon. That's Chewbacca's grandmother. That all stands alone. That's great, though. I would like to take something new and create some new characters, just expand the world. Otherwise, it feels like a very small story." I feel like Taika taking a little bit of an inadvertent shot at like The Force Awakens and Solo, a Star Wars story, and those sorts of things.
And Obi-Wan Kenobi and a lot of the stuff that's been happening.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not bad to say, I just want to do something different, and I think it can be good for these reasons. Like, I don't think he's putting it down. He's just saying, I'm going off in another direction, and I think for me, this is a better story for me to tell.
I think it's safe. It's not a criticism. It's just a statement of, like, a lot of Star Wars, especially recently, has relied heavily on nostalgia and previously established characters and stories. The Book of Boba Fett, the sequel trilogy, even Rogue One with all of its, and people, as much as people love that movie and all of its new characters, it's still connected to the first Star Wars movie. And now you have Obi-Wan Kenobi and all this kind of stuff. And, like, yes, the universe is expanding, but, it isn't. It isn't. I love Taika's quote there saying, like, for it to expand, it needs to expand. It needs to do other things. And I love that someone like him is coming in and going, like, yeah, I want to do, anything that's like a Yoda movie or something like that. Like, as much as I'll be like, oh yeah, Taika Waititi doing a Yoda movie, that'd be great. I'm more thrilled with the idea of him going, like, yeah, I don't want to do anything that's previously established. I want to do something completely new and fresh, and I want to expand the universe as opposed to just going back to the well. We need that. We need more of this. As many as we need as many Obi-Wan Kenobis as we need the Mandalorians. Like, we need to continue to go back to old things and bring old things back, but also expand what Star Wars is.
Yeah. I think that's fair. It's an interesting balance that needs to be struck with Star Wars movies. And this is a guy that's coming off of, a couple of very successful Marvel movies, and I think you could say the same thing about them, which is you have to find that line between something that's sort of nostalgic, fan servicey of, Millennium Falcon, Chewbacca's grandmother, that sort of thing, while also making sure that you're not just making the same movie over and over again, that you're making something new and interesting, and that pushes the boundaries of what Star Wars, or Marvel for that matter, can be. Because this is what, sometimes I feel like when you get stuff that is a little too inward looking and a little too nostalgia based, you kind of are just going through the same motions, and you're not pushing the boundaries of what Star Wars can be, which is what he's saying. You wind up, the movies wind up feeling or the stories wind up feeling a little hollow, because part of what was so great about Star Wars in the first place was that you were seeing something you had never seen before, something that was unlike anything else you'd ever seen. And that, as much as, seeing the Millennium Falcon on screen again can recapture some of that feeling, seeing something else new and exciting in that universe can capture that feeling as well. Because, the thing that people always say about the original Star Wars film is, nobody had ever seen anything like that Star Destroyer going over the top, over the screen in the opening scene. So, I think someone like Taika is well suited to find a new version of the Star Destroyer over the camera scene, by which I don't mean just a different, bigger design of the Star Destroyer. I mean something completely different that makes you feel the same way.
I think what's funny is that ties back to what we just did, because that is the essence of my rating systems when I rate anything Star Wars is, did we see something we haven't seen before? Like, that's the question that I ask. Like, I give things a 9 out of 10 when it's something that's really good, but we've seen it before. I reserve the 10 out of 10 for things that expand the universe in some way. The first time that I ever gave something in Star Wars, since Star Wars, which I guess means since 2005, a 10 out of 10 rating was the Clone Wars episode Lair of Grievous, because that was kind of like a horror story inside the Star Wars universe. And the first time the Clone Wars did that, and it had a bit of a Saw vibe to it, despite me not seeing Saw. I'm assuming that's what they kind of were going for, from what I know about it. And that was the first time I gave something a 10 out of 10 since Revenge of the Sith, about 10 episodes into the Clone Wars. Because it did that. It expanded it, and they brought in, a director who hadn't worked on Star Wars before. I think it was Boss Khan, I think. And it was great. So that's what I'd love to see from him. And if he does something new, it's probably going to get a 10 out of 10 for me, just because it's new.
Yeah. For sure. Just to add on some more context about where Taika's movie is at the moment, there's another quote from him that he gave to Screen Rant in an interview where he says, he's asked about sort of the status of it. He says, "That's yet to be seen. I don't know. I'm still writing. I'm still coming up with the ideas and storylining it, and just want to make sure that it feels like a Star Wars film." Because I could say, oh yeah, we'll just write any old thing set in space and then put Star Wars on the front, but it wouldn't be a Star Wars film without certain elements and a certain treatment. So I've just got to make sure that it stays within that wheelhouse. So yeah, again, we're sort of seeing the the two sides of what we were saying before. Is you want something that feels like it belongs in Star Wars, but also expands what Star Wars is, which sounds contradictory, but it's also what The Empire Strikes Back did. So, no pressure, Taika. That's the standard you're expected to hit. Yeah. But again, I feel like Taika's the right guy, because as he's saying, he says it's got to fit within the wheelhouse in one quote, but he's also saying the wheelhouse is more than just having the Millennium Falcon in it. I think he's talking about something deeper, more philosophical, more spiritual, more, something
the
deeper.
Star Wars sandbox is the reason why it's so great, is because you can do almost anything inside it. Like, it's a galaxy where you can basically create a planet and it can look like anything. It can look like New York City. It can look like Simi Valley. Like, it can look like whatever you want. And so you've got your locations can be anything. As we've kind of seen, you can kind of be anywhere with the technology too, because there are primitive peoples in Star Wars that don't have as much technology as the sci-fi intragalactic civilization. There we go. Right prefixes. And then even with like supernatural elements or superpowers, there's a lot of range in Star Wars because you have the Force, but you also have sorcery and Star Wars too, with like the Night Sisters. And so you kind of can have different types of powers that you can play around with, the different types of metaphysics that you can play around with as well. So when you can have any species of character, because there's an unlimited amount of aliens, when you can have any language that you just want to make up, when you can have any planet, when you can have any range of technology and any type of power that you want, you basically are like, yeah, it's Dungeons and Dragons and you can make your own character and campaign. And there's really no limits behind Star Wars. And I think Taika Waititi is on the right track when he's saying, like, yo, this doesn't need to be about Vader or Han Solo or R2-D2 to be Star Wars. It literally could be anything, and it can be Star Wars. That's why we will see things like Guardians of the Galaxy and be like, if they had slapped the Star Wars label on that, we would have believed it.
And as much as people love to put Star Wars in a box and say it's Star Wars is this thing right here, and a lot of times it coincides with exactly what they like. And as much as there are dark moments, there are dark things. There's Anakin killing younglings and Vader wiping out rebels. There's also scenes where droid sings to himself in the vacuum of space, there's other things, there's goofy things. It's goofy, it's funny. And I think a lot of people, me included, of looking at Taika's like repertoire and his, especially Thor Ragnarok, which I think probably most people know him from, thinking, oh, he's goofy, he's funny, he can do action, he can do space opera. It's the Ragnarok, a little bit of Guardians, a little bit of Star Wars, all this kind of stuff. But I also appreciate him for just how deep that movie is. Like, it's a lot of social commentary, a lot of very deep themes about family and growing up, and just so many things that I think are like, I see things in Thor Ragnarok that I get disappointed when I see other movies because they don't have those elements. And ultimately, I think he's going to bring something to this. I think maybe no one else can, in his perspective, obviously, but also just his brand of storytelling that isn't just like funny, goofy things. It's very, very deep. And bringing that to something that we've never seen before in Star Wars, I think. I think the challenge now, we've come past the whole will they put Ahsoka in live action? Will they put Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian? They did all that. Now the challenge is, can they make a Star Wars movie or show that has nothing to do with any of the movies, with any of the Skywalkers? Just stands alone completely. I was so impressed with Moon Knight. Moon Knight was just like the standalone thing that has nothing to do with the MCU hardly. I was like, that's what the challenge is now. That's making something that's just like standalone. Isn't actually connected to anything. It is connected, but it's not. And that's impressive now.
And to avoid the Star Wars archetype toolbox too. Because, this has been attempted before. For instance, the Old Republic is an attempt at creating new Star Wars that's completely disconnected from everything else. There aren't any characters in the Old Republic that, are in the other films because it's set so many years before. But, those character archetypes are similar. Like, you have, the clone army, just kind of a little bit different. You have Jango Fett, but it's a woman now. Like, and you've got
a dude that's basically Han Solo, but with Cad Bane's hat.
That's exactly what I was going to say next. Yeah, and so like, you can't do that either. You can't just be like, oh, it's all new characters, but it's not. They just have different names and slightly different looks and actors, but it's still the same archetypes as the films. So that's really, again, what we want to see is him pull a Moon Knight and just really go off in a different direction and be like, yeah, this is inside the Star Wars universe. You might hear something referenced that you recognize, like, oh, hyperspace or a hologram or some little touch point like
Lightsaber.
that. Yeah, like, oh, it's a lightsaber. But really, that's all that there needs to be. It doesn't even need that.
It's a lot like some of the Visions shorts, right?
Exactly.
Like a great Star Wars story that we got in the last year, the Ninth Jedi.
Yeah,
like that's a story that has no characters, no familiar characters, no familiar planets, no familiar ships, and yet it feels intrinsically like a Star Wars story. So much so that I feel like of all the Vision shorts, that's the one that feels most suited to a follow-up, perhaps even its own show someday, but we'll see. I mentioned the Kathleen Kennedy quote from earlier. I just want to give it to you all in full so that we cover all of our bases here. Again, she was interviewed by Total Film at Celebration, and was asked if the next Star Wars movie, again being Taika Waititi's movie, will arrive in 2023. She said this: "Yeah, well, not 2023, but late 2023. We haven't locked anything in," which is such an interesting quote. I wonder if that's a little bit of movie producer speak, where 2023 and late 2023 mean two very different things to her when it comes to what it would take to release a movie in those time windows, or if, as I was speculating earlier, one of those numbers was meant to be 2024.
I think what she probably meant, if it's 2023, it would be late 2023, but most likely 2024. That quote would have made more sense.
Yeah, which I think is probably it. Probably what was meant there.
I mean, it's hard to remember too that 2023 is next year.
Yeah,
like
right?
There's something about the pandemic and coming off of it where we feel like we should be further back in time than we actually are, because less stuff has happened to us in certain veins of our life over the past few years.
Right.
And then also 2019 feels like 2 decades ago.
Yes, they're saying 2 decades ago, and depending on what metric you're thinking about.
Right.
The last time we were all hanging out in a theater, that's weird.
Yeah. I wonder, the fact that she's saying, that she's still leaving open the door that late 2023 is possible. I mean, I feel like we're closing in on the window where you would have to start shooting.
For sure.
August or September at the absolute latest. And there was a report in Production Weekly, which is sort of a industry publication, that space is being allocated in Los Angeles for this movie at a production studio. So, but that could just mean they're using the space
that's
for.
Why I'm not in the normal studio, because we got to do some renovations to it.
But that could just mean they're getting ready to build some props. They're setting up an art department, or it could mean that all that's been done somewhere else and they're ready to start shooting September 1st. Who knows? Taika's saying he's still writing. Well, is he writing the first draft or the fourth draft?
Right.
There is some, a little bit of a from a certain point of view going on with all of this stuff. It could mean one thing, or it could mean something very different. It could mean we're very close, or it could still mean we're a ways off. I don't know what the Disney schedule looks like in 2024, but I don't know. Is there a big May movie? Maybe we don't have to wait till December 2024. I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah. What if we go back to May? I think December and Star Wars go hand in hand very nicely. But watch
them never put a Star Wars movie out in May again, and actually tell us they do understand. They're just been BSing us to protect certain people about that.
maybe, but if ultimately, Disney will make the choice to release this movie based on how long they think it will need to make, and when they think they can make the most money from it, and when they have an appropriate space in their schedule. And if they look at all of those factors and decide, you know what, we got a little bit of space here in May 2024 or June 2024 or April 2024. And we've looked at the metrics, the post-pandemic theater metrics, and, you know, we'll put it on video on demand very soon after it's in theaters.
That's fascinating.
Maybe, you know, the whole idea of a December release because it'll make $1 billion it isn't the driving factor
Has
anymore.
anything made $1 billion? Did Spider-Man make $1 billion?
I think Spider-Man did.
Okay, yeah,
Sure.
I'm sure Spidey. I think Spidey did, and you can bet there will be a new there'll be another Marvel movie in the next little while that will be joining the ranks. I'm
Avengers 5. Or
Yeah.
6, 7. I don't know where they're at.
I think
Somewhere.
if Doctor Strange were a better movie, it probably could have done it. But it just, given the hype that was around that movie, if it had lived up to it a little bit more, I think it could have.
Yeah.
But
I think Spider-Man's in a unique position because it's a dual fan base. Because
Yes.
you have people who are just Spider-Man fans, whereas Doctor Strange, I don't feel like there's as much as that.
Yeah, it's
fair.
amazing that, you know, 6 months ago it's like who would win in this argument? Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, or Top Gun 2?
Oh.
Here we are, Top Gun 2,
Yeah.
highest grossing movie of 2022. So
No,
far.
that doesn't surprise me at all. Like, Top Gun is an iconic classic movie, and Tom Cruise always brings in a number. So,
and that movie has had 3 years of marketing.
yeah.
Because we saw trailers
on Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how long that movie
It's true.
has been. People have been waiting for that movie. So when it finally came out, yeah, it was gonna rake in the dough, so
Yeah.
to speak. Before we wrap things up, shout out to a new channel member, Jonathan. I believe that makes you CC003 in our
Yes.
bizarre clone. Or CT003 in our
Yeah.
bizarre clone
We're
battalion.
the
that we've
CCs
stuck-
over here.
Yeah, you're right. So welcome, Jonathan. You now get this cool symbol next to your name that is the Star Wars Underworld symbol if you're looking at the chat on YouTube, and it's this weird S thing when it shows up on the screen.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard. Before we wrap things up, Joel threw in a super chat a while ago, just sort of putting a button on what we were talking about earlier with some of the Anakin stuff. And he mentioned that he sent in a longer email that goes into all of this that we'll get to in the future. The mailbag is starting to fill up a little bit, so I'm sure we'll be due for a proper mailbag episode.
It's so big we have to bring in Santa's elves because they're the only ones that have dealt with letters of this magnitude.
Yep. It'll be like that. It's like that scene in Miracle on 34th Street when they bring all the letters into the courtroom. But yeah, so
You don't think Santa Claus is real? Look at that.
Yeah. So we'll have we'll be due for another mailbag at some point in the not too distant
Use it
future.
to prove we're real.
All right. Well, I think with that, we can begin to wrap things up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been a great discussion we've had here, I think. I mean, I think it is. It's really up for all of you listening to decide whether or not it was actually a great discussion. But we certainly had fun, and I hope you had fun listening too. We'll be back next week to talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 6, the Season 1 finale. I'm gonna call it the Season 1 finale because it wouldn't shock me if the finale was followed not too soon after it. Maybe not day of, maybe not even the same week, but by the end of the year, with an announcement of a follow-up season. This thing has been so big and so popular and so well received that I can't imagine they wouldn't do more, especially with
What about the plot holes? The plot holes.
the Grand Inquisitor's identical cousin
Plot
will
holes
return.
filled, okay, shut up.
And of course,
they should have just left him dead so that we could explain that this differences in sizes of the Force.
And of course, next week, I'll also tell y'all what it was like to watch the finale on the big screen in the theater with Deborah Chow and Hayden Christensen there. We'll have a great time. Talking about that as well. So make sure you tune in for that. Ben, thank you as always for hosting.
Oh, it was a pleasure. As always, love the super in-depth discussions on these episodes. I think as much as we talked about that one scene, that one moment, we still barely scratched the surface on that moment. Honestly, these things are so dense, and it just kills me of, most of the discourse seems to be like, oh, that episode was great, or it was garbage. And I'm like, there's so much more to discuss. Like, even if you didn't like it or you loved it, these things are so dense. Each of these episodes are so just packed full of amazingness. Just absolutely amazing things that a lot of us can't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine just a few years ago. So yeah, we're living again. Great time to be a Star Wars fan, guys. Saying it for the millionth time. Who knows what we have coming at our faces next week, but looking forward to getting into all of that in 1 week's time.
And of course, make sure you follow Ben at Ben Hart with no E on social media. Ben changed his name on the screen in the middle of the show from his social media handle to just decided that he is now Ben Kenobi. So you are now
Ben
Obi-Wan.
Kenobi.
You are now Obi-Wan.
I don't know. Is at Ben Kenobi? Is it taken on Twitter? I'm going to check that.
I have a feeling. Somebody scooped that up.
At Ben Kenobi 1? Maybe?
At Ben Kenobi 1977.
At Ben Kenobi 4534215. Yeah, okay, I'll take that one.
That's what Ewan McGregor was doing when Twitter was invented. He's just sitting there getting all the Ben Kenobi usernames for himself.
Yeah, if there's a Ben Kenobi username out there that tweets a lot about motorcycles, I think you found Ewan's burner account. I think you found it. Chris, thank you as always for hosting. I know we're sort of flipped in our roles here at the end of the show, so I don't know if you want to plug Percy the Puffer Pig or something. I don't know.
I literally don't know what to do. Follow Culture Slate on social media for all the great articles that our writers write about so many things, Star Wars, Marvel, and more. That's my plug.
There you go. Well plugged.
At Culture Slate on Twitter and Facebook, and we actually do have a TikTok.
There you go. Follow all of that, and of course follow Chris at Seek3PO. And you can follow me at Dominic J25. I'm sure I'll post a thing or two about that screening and Q&A next week. I have an idea for something I want to try to make happen while I'm there, but I'm not going to tell you all what it is now. But I hope to be able to show you next week. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. And you can follow me at Dominic J25. And of course, follow the Star Wars Underworld at the SWU. Send in your listener feedback to swunderworld@gmail.com. Join the mailbag that we're going to take to a courtroom and drop in front of Santa Claus one of these days. Follow us on Patreon. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/theswu. Become a channel member like Jesse, Joel, and Jonathan. Super chat with us next week. Make sure you subscribe and review on all your favorite podcasting platforms, including YouTube, where you can't so much review as just sort of, comment. But that's fun too. And check out our friends. Star Wars Culture, Ion Cannon. Good people over there. All right, that's it. That'll do it. We'll get out of here now. Thank you, everybody, for listening. For Ben and Chris, my name is Dominic, and may the Force be with you. Music ran out, and I don't have the end card. There it is.
Whoopsie.
There it is. It's a wrap.